Welcome aboard CANAL Lightvessel Automatic, Whitchurch's answer to pirate radio. Sadly, it's fully legal and not a radio station. On the plus side, Tony Blackburn is not with us, and seasickness tablets are unnecessary. So settle back for the lock-in, a meandering journey, occasionally fraught with the rusty shopping trolleys that fate throws in our path as we get to know some of the people who have helped contribute to making our brilliant market town that also has a canal where we are. Oh, hang on. Just turn that one off. That's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are we ready?
Yeah.
So just drop Charlie off back at home for his final dinner before he buggers off back to Uzbekistan. What a great guy.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I know, right? What did he all do?
Unbelievable that we've probably had future greatness. Well, actual greatness at the moment, but...
Well, Dave and I are here.
But he's destined for really great things, is Charlie, isn't he?
23.
Yeah.
Worked for the Uzbek government.
Yeah.
Now works for the World Bank.
Yeah.
In urbanisation and climate change consulting for them.
Yeah.
And really, I thought what came across to me was that local story, starting at grassroots, understanding what people want and need in their community, and then helping to enable that.
Yeah. I mean, who knew a person of 23 could even care about that? But there he is.
Speak for yourself.
Well, but you know what I'm saying.
Girls and music, wasn't it?
Well, I know it was girls and music.
But you're absolutely right. They're just unbelievably eloquent.
Yeah.
You know, great humanitarian side, and just a genuinely intelligent and really warm guy, I thought.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, absolute pleasure to talk to him. Really, really nice fella.
Yeah, really excellent.
So we're doing this very quickly because it literally was a last minute grab. So there'll be no photos of him. He's probably a spy, isn't he?
Well, you didn't
Did
take
you
a
want to ask
photo.
that?
You took a photo, didn't you?
Yeah, but we're not going to overlay it with lots of photographs.
No,
It won't be fair.
But
It'll
yeah.
just be the slow, the slow boat to Wenlock.
Yeah, I didn't ask him if he was a spy.
No, you wanted.
He said, "Do you expect me to talk?"
No.
No, and that's where it ended.
No, I just expect you to give me dinner and give me beer.
Yeah,
but no, we will. Charlie, it's about 45 minutes long.
Yeah,
and if you are interested in the world and how it relates to us, because let's face it, they are interlinked. It's a really great listen, and to have someone so young and so eloquent. And that's what we're going to try and do more of, wasn't it? Because there are lots of people like that around.
Yeah, there are.
And they need celebrating.
Are. Yeah, I think so. Not old crusty buggers like us, eh?
Again, speak for yourself.
Righto. On with the podcast.
Enjoy it.
Cheers.
Something works for me.
But, all right then, you slump away, mate.
So, has everyone got beers?
Yeah, I just wanted to do the usual housekeeping thing. That obviously is the no clonking, because that shows up really well in the recording and all that. And we just start recording, which we've already done, and we just have a chat.
Perfect. Thanks, Laurie. Yeah, I kind of concepted this, but appreciate you for reminding me.
Well, because I'm the producer.
That is a very good point, and it is your boat and your sound
Charlie's comfortable and relaxed and everything.
Have you given him his rider?
His Smarties.
Did you get that long list?
The Smarties with the blues all taken.
Oh, that was the
brown M&Ms.
That was the Vickers. So, Charlie. So tonight we are joined by Charlie Norman. We are trying to reduce the age of our demographic. I mean, despite being sponsored by L'Oreal just for men moisturiser, I'm actually 50, and a lot of our guests have been, I would say, no, I'm not even going to include Maria on this, north of 32. So what we're trying to do is our community is made up of many different parts, many different ages. So we're trying to look at kind of people in their 30s, 20s who are local and are either starting their career here or somewhere else, but have spent a lot of time in Whitchurch, and just to find out what they're doing. And tonight we've literally just hoiked off the plane to, which part of Russia is it? Uzbekistan?
Uzbekistan, not part of Russia.
Sorry, ex-Soviet Union.
Yes.
Ex-USSR, of course. We've had the Velvet Revolution. We've hoiked him off the plane and stuck him on a narrowboat, but we're going for kind of slow, comfortable journeys rather than a quick flight. So Charlie is here, and he's about to fly off to Uzbekistan. So thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to be here, thank you.
Yes, I imagine it really is. This must be the peak of your career.
It's close. Nice to be inside a canal boat.
You're getting there, mate. You're getting there.
Yeah.
Despite having worked for the Uzbek government and now the World Bank, you're on the lock-in with CANAL Lightvessel Automatic. So you are flying back very soon.
Yeah.
Why? What are you doing out there?
So I am a specialist, a consultant on climate change and urban development in Central Asia. So I'm going back to work for the World Bank, but I've been working there going to and from for a few years now. So it's not my first flight from London or Manchester to Central Asia. And so, yeah, it's exciting to be going back. It's only for 9 months this time, so I'll be coming back again in the summer at least. But yeah, that's my...
So how on earth? So you grew up in Whitchurch?
Yep.
So what's the background? What?
So born in Wrexham, lived 18 years in Whitchurch, went to school in Bronington in Wales and then in Newport, but always lived in Whitchurch. I then went to St Andrews, studied international relations, and was offered a joint degree to do Russian as well, which I'd never studied Russian before. I'd never done or never succeeded in any of the languages. Took on Russian because I enjoyed it, and it's not a very stable time to be doing international relations in Russian. But there's a lot of the rest of the world.
A very useful time.
It is if you go into that sector. In the other sectors, it's not so promising. But there's a huge part of the world that speaks Russian or has been under that influence.
Absolutely.
That isn't Russia. And I got very interested in that. Started studying Central Asia, which has such a long history, incredible culture, great people, very comfortable place to now live like I do. And got very interested in that. Started consulting for the government, and yeah, now I call it basically home.
So when you were younger, when you were at school, what was it what sparked you? What sparked the interest? I mean, this could be, you might have taken a completely different path, but when you were at school and when you were younger, well, all of 5, 6, 7 years ago, what were the passions and what's driven you?
I mean, you go to a small school.
For example, the only reason I'm asking is if I was to speak to Laurie or Steve Chapman, I've got 45 years to play with, but with you, I've got 4.5.
Well, I must admit, Charlie, just sorry for interrupting, but when you said I did this, and then I went to work for the government, and I thought, hang on a minute, Charlie, there must be a little story there as how that actually managed to.
You anticipated my question. Yeah. I thought, how the hell does that happen so quickly? You missed a bit out there.
Yeah. So
do you guys want to ask the question? You've just been waiting to ask all afternoon.
No.
So
okay, good.
So I got a scholarship to do some research in first Bishkek, which is the capital of Kyrgyzstan. That was my first time in the region, and then Tashkent in Uzbekistan, and that opened a lot of doors to talk to quite high-level figures. One of those ended up being the advisor to the Minister of Ecology of Uzbekistan. So they had decided, they have these very grand schemes, and they decided to found a university from scratch on sustainable development, because sustainable development, climate change isn't an issue that parents send their children to go and study, right? You want your child to be a lawyer, an engineer, a doctor. Sure. You don't want them to be a climate specialist, because if you don't understand what it is,
no, not one of those.
Yeah, exactly. So they said, right, we need to found a university to do it, because the ones we have aren't going to offer it. But they wanted this to be a regional university. Yeah. And because I'd studied these sort of dynamics between the 5 Central Asian states, so Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan, considered these 5 stands, I encouraged. So I was working on the sort of strategy to involve them all. So they founded this entire university. It now has over 200 students in 2 years.
Yeah, I know, and from scratch.
Yes.
A university that didn't exist before.
And I started on it when it didn't exist. They gave me things
really
like
sort of proto-student.
Do some of the graphic design on the side if you like. What should we call these 3 floors? I go back and they're called what I decided they would be called. And I taught there last year as well, which has been that was quite an insight into how these governments work.
And what was the reasoning? Was the reason to do that investment, or because they take it incredibly seriously, or
they take it incredibly seriously?
Investment.
Well, both, but you can't. They go hand in hand. I mean, right? We talk about renewable energy as something like a nice to have here.
Yeah.
Because the big problem that we have with climate change is our emissions, really. But we are starting to see rising sea levels. The weather's getting more unpredictable. You speak to a farmer now around here, they don't know what's going to happen next week with their crops. So we're starting to see it. But I've lived there now, been going there to and from for a few years. There's plenty of times you turn the water on and there's just no water. There's nothing in the taps. it gets to 45, 50 degrees in the middle of the day now because of climate change.
Because it's landlocked, so in the summer it's getting hugely hot.
So what, the aquifers have just...
Yep, and they'd rely on water. They rely on water that comes from glaciers and from rainfall. And if that's very unpredictable, if they're having long periods without
freezing up, or
glaciers are melting, and the water's disappearing. It's not being released at a steady rate. And so for them, they know that if there isn't investment in the people that know about climate change, then any other kind of investment really isn't worth it. You know, train lines, we know, well, for example, they're massive investing in railways. We've seen in Britain this year that extreme heat during the summer has led to cancelled trains because trains can't cope with extreme heat. If you don't have people that understand what those trends will be in Central Asia, they know that there's just no point in investing in that.
So we know that, or a number of us know that, Ukraine is often called the breadbasket of Europe. And in many ways, you look at the grain prices that were affected, how Africa was affected, for example, at the start of the Russo-Ukraine war. Is the areas that you work, is it fairly agrarian? Is it a huge part of the economy? Is it contributing in terms of crops, cereal crops?
So they have the best fruit and vegetables you'll ever taste. I love Shropshire for many things, the UK for many things, but the quality of the fruit and veg that you get is just like nothing you've ever tasted, I promise. The tomatoes, the cucumbers, melons, and quarter of the price and 10 times better than you get in the UK, even from the best shops, whatever, because it's not imported, it's local. They have huge flat areas of land full of crops. The issue is that it's all irrigated. If in 20 years if the water stops now, in 20 years that will be desert again. And this population of 35, 40 million people won't have any local.
So when you say desert,
produce.
so was it desert previously, which has been irrigated, and it's human intervention has allowed that area to become fruitful.
During the Soviet era, they were just investing massively in industry. They had
with a centralised economy.
Yeah, centralised economy, and they were just investing massively in it, and led to a huge number of ecological problems as well. The rivers running dry. There was an entire sea in the east of the country that completely run dry now. Sorry, the west of the country. But it did lead to a massive uptick in production. So very agrarian. A lot of people are on it still.
So whereas we were talking in the car, weren't we, in your chauffeur-driven Mercedes-Benz S-Class on the way here, that we have, in terms of climate change, you've got, actually, do we really, and this is what Farage is banging on about at the moment, and, it's an opinion, actually it's damaging us, taking it seriously, it's damaging us with the green economy. Trump saying the other day, why are you guys not drilling all of that oil? Yeah. And I think in the UK, yes, we have a number of people who are very pro to it, Steve Chapman obviously being one, with the Blackberry Fair, and that's an example of locally where it's being taken seriously. Obviously we've got farmers now who are not sure where it's going, but I think there are two things. There is one, it's, if we do this, it's affecting my day-to-day life, it's making me poorer, and I don't see the long-term benefit. You then have the apathy, you then have the fearmongers saying, well, it doesn't even exist, it's a hoax. And I think in the UK, on the kind of the bell curve, the Gaussian bell curve, where people are, but where you're working, would you say it's much more front of mind because it's visible everywhere?
Yeah, I would definitely. I mean, I was never a climate activist before. I was international relations. I didn't study sustainable development. I wasn't school striking, any of those
powder
things.
Over.
No,
but you were aware.
Yeah, exactly. Concern. Yeah, and I go there and I see quite how extreme it can feel. So we've all felt the heat this summer, and I've been talking to my parents here as well. Everyone's felt it this summer, I think, especially if you go into the cities, and there is just an extreme case of that. And the science shows that if we talk about like 1.5 or 2 degrees warming, right, there's these global targets we have, it's an average. If the world warms by 1.5, Central Asia will warm by 3 degrees Celsius.
So it's a real question. We're all right, Jack.
Yeah, if the world warms by 3 degrees, Central Asia will warm by 6. And 3 is like the extreme. But imagine, a 6 degree average is huge.
Absolutely.
And it plays with, that means that extreme temperatures are going to be much higher, but it also just plays with the weather system so much more. You'll get, milder winters, which can really affect snow and then water supply. You get very variable springs and autumns, which are the most crucial for agriculture, and so on. So yeah, I would say it's much more extreme. To give you one example, the heat there is much more extreme. I live in a city, Tashkent, the biggest city. There's something called the urban heat island effect. Yeah. So you have the countries, everywhere is getting warmer. This is global average. Our country's getting warmer, especially the summers are getting much warmer. This is an average. Other places will get colder at different times of years, but our summers are getting hotter. Summers get much hotter everywhere. But in our cities, what happens to these cities, because they're full of concrete, because they're full of houses that aren't built to circulate air, these cities heat up during the day.
So you're getting your own weather system,
and then they stay hot at night.
Yeah, they just trap it.
They trap it at night, and that's really detrimental. I mean, there's reports coming from the World Bank actually about Central Asia's productivity. There's everything from there's studies that show that the hotter the country is and the hotter it stays at night, the hotter the city is, the hotter it stays at night, the lower average maths test scores are, the higher death rate is. This is affecting people's health, and people
more
feel
riots
it.
there are, or
health. You're not resting at night. You're not, and it really is.
It's such a fascinating point there, and my degree was history, politics, and economics, and it part of that was industrialisation, revolution. A lot of it, the most enjoyable part, bizarrely, was the Cold War. Not that the Cold War was enjoyable, but it was a very interesting part of history. But I think a lot of people, we don't realise sometimes how much your geography affects your politics. Mm-hmm. Why did we have the Industrial Revolution in this country? Because we had a wonderful climate. Yeah. We had fertile land. We were temperate. The heat wasn't killing us each day to even get out of bed. Mm-hmm. And to me, where the country is situated and the climate it has a huge impact on its development. And if you look forward, it impacts what you can do, where you can appropriate the resources that you have in terms of human education. Where you have to spend resource, for example, in irrigation. Is that a fair point? I think geopolitics?
There's a lot to say to that. And I mean, right from geopolitics right down to societies and the way we live every day. So to give you one example, Uzbeks call themselves the sunniest people in the world, and they're incredibly friendly, incredibly open, and they have the most sunlight in the world. And I think the darker a country gets, often more closed off people are. You move even to different things like the way a house is built. In Uzbekistan, houses are built with every room open onto a courtyard because it's sunny most of the time, it's warm, it makes sense.
It makes sense. There's a lot of flat roofs probably in places that haven't got a lot of rain. It affects the architecture.
Our buildings are built very differently.
Yeah.
Now, in the summer, we're seeing that our buildings, they don't have air conditioning, they don't have a way of circulating air, they're designed to be hot and to trap in heat. People are suffering now because of that heat in the summer. So yeah, and there's a huge amount. And then right up to the other side, when I come back here, and actually I have a great story about an Uzbek friend that's been to visit Whitchurch, but you come here and just the amount of greenery after spending 13 months in a pretty deserted country, to come back and just see the amount of greenery, the amount of things just growing on the side of the road.
It's easy. It's easy to grow stuff here.
Shropshire gives you that, and most of our country does.
We get on our food, our milk, our pastures. It's easy for us to eat and to drink, which means we have time and effort, not in 50-degree heat, to go, actually, let's go and have an industrial revolution. I know I'm massively oversimplifying it.
Yeah,
but it's easier.
Yeah, and it was that reason that, Uzbekistan, the whole of Central Asia has been populated for much, since ancient times. So they've been able to grow things, but not on an industrial scale.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. To do that onto an industrial scale required this huge over-engineering, massive canal project, which, we're already starting to see both there and here questioning those kind of techniques of industrialisation, agriculture, because it's destroying the biodiversity we have, because it's putting huge pressure on water supply, leading to overconsumption and so on. So it's a fascinating to see these parallels between these two worlds that I live in. I come back here and I see a lot of the same issues being talked about more and more now here as well, which is promising.
So what is the premise of the World Bank? You get back into it. What's its 25-second? What is its ethos, and what are the objectives of the World Bank? What's it there to do?
So the World Bank as a whole, works with the developing countries, member nations. So we have developed states and developing states. Developed states tend to be donor countries, so like the UK puts money into the World Bank with the prospect of a return. It's not just free money.
So I was wondering it was bankrolling.
Yeah, exactly. Like. And the World Bank then takes that money to governments and says, well, what projects, what do you need that can't just be funded by the private sector, but will help in the long run your country to develop? So, this could be big infrastructure projects, it could be roads, it could be railways that we've seen what happens when you try and privatise some of these developments, that actually it's often not the best way. So the government often takes the money to do it.
The water industry is fantastic.
Well, exactly. So this money helps the governments decide what they do with it themselves. And, I will be open, there's been a huge learning from both sides for a long, long time. About the best way to implement these kind of projects. Some of them have been very problematic, some of them take in sort of these foreign values that then don't work in the country they're being imposed in. But for example, the project I work on takes 16 of the poorest, least developed Uzbek cities around the country and invests in them instead of the capital city, instead of the one. So it's putting money, and we work on capacity building for the local district level, so for people involvement, for their government involvement, to say where do we need to invest this money to make your cities more livable, so better for life, quality of life, and better for the economy, and better for the environment.
So it's is it working?
So this is very early stage for this project in particular. It will be up to 500 million USD investing in small Uzbek cities, which the government takes this on as a loan. So it's not free money. No. The government will pay interest on this, and that interest comes back to the donor countries. So that kind of approach has been shown to work in other countries, and there's other examples.
And I presume, obviously, Britain and the Levelling Up scheme is an absolute prime example of it working really, really well. Have you had Andy Burnham over it to try and consult?
It's a very different political system there. Let's say it's a much more stable government, and that comes with its benefits. Of course, it's not always what we would expect our government to be quite so responsive to demands, but on the other side, you know what to expect all the time. Mm-hmm. So those figures don't come up very often, I have to say.
So what was, when you moved out, you St Andrews, and then how quickly were you into...
Straight out there.
You were straight out there?
Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of adjusting, you were very young. I mean, I left university and it was a long way away, which was, it was terrifying when I left. But I made a big move, and I moved about 150 miles away to Northampton, which I've got to say was a real shock to the system.
Yeah.
But for you, that's adjustment. And at a very young age, how did you find it?
So, so I'd been going back and forth for a couple of years, doing this research, doing these projects with the government. So moving out to live there wasn't my first time going there. I think that would have been a shock.
Oh, so it wasn't such of a culture shock?
No, the first time I was going, it was for 2 weeks, and then it was for a month, and then it was for 6 weeks, and then I was moving out there to live.
Sort of gradual.
So that was quite good in that sense. I have to say, though, that part of the world is a great balance for me between always being stimulating. There's always something that's interesting. I buy my groceries at the bazaar. You go and haggle for your groceries. That's always cool. That's always interesting. But at the same time, there's not this huge kind of sensory overload that you might get that I would certainly feel I would get in other parts of the world. Or, of course, speaking Russian helps as well. They have their own local language, which everybody speaks, or most people speak, but Russian is kind of the international language. Like, you could go to Europe and still probably do okay with English. Yeah. There you can go and do okay with Russian.
Do you speak the local speak?
I speak a bit of it.
Yeah.
It's only been a year, and I mean, the hours I was working, I didn't have time. And of course, a bit lazy as well, knowing Russian, because professional language is in Russian.
That'll
exactly,
work. Just wondering.
No, it's very different.
I sound like a young bass.
Bass.
Slay.
Yeah, so it's a Turkic language, so it's much closer to Turkish and to the other ones in there. So it's a completely different language family as well, which is not easy. And they have very long words. They don't have like water with gas, or like carbonated water, or water without. It's all in one word. Okay. So like if you're looking for a water and it says Gazang Mandan, that's without bubbles basically, and Gazanga Mandan is with bubbles, and so it's very,
that's almost aggressive gutsy German.
But it's a very beautiful language, very interesting, and the culture there is so rich as well. So that's been really great. So I would say it wasn't such a shock for me. It would be for a lot of people, but actually it's growing more and more now for tourism. You know, my parents came from Whitchurch to visit me in April, had an amazing time. We get a lot of tourists now, so people seem to find it, you know, approachable.
So this, you said you weren't a climate activist when you were young. You had an interest. Was it the, because I've always found, and I found at university as well, and I've always struggled to a point with local and domestic politics. I found foreign politics and international relations way more interesting.
Exactly.
And I think it was that kind of whole big picture and that interdependence, into the relatability, and I just found that absolutely fascinating. And so was that the driver, and was that the
funny.
passion?
It's interesting actually. So I was going back to your question about, you know, the sort of education at a very young age, you know, as one of the sort of the people in school, you know, they put you into categories saying, oh, he's going to be a lawyer, an engineer, a doctor, whatever. I was always that precocious kid that was going to be prime minister. Got to the end of school and I decided I didn't want to
world
study.
king.
Yeah, you went general secretary. Yeah.
Actually, we had Matt Hancock at our school.
Oh. Wow, okay.
Yeah, Lee said.
So that kind of encouragement to stay out of local politics, or sort of domestic politics, let's say. So I chose to do pure international relations, not politics and IR, which usually is offered at universities.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I would say that is, but I think my journey has been quite interesting because I started off wanting to do this big picture thing, ended up focusing on regional politics and how the 5 Central Asian states work together. Then I started looking at the countries and how the governments work with international and local levels. And now I work on a project that has no international element. It's working in 16 local cities, you know, local governments in Uzbekistan. But they hired me, an international relations graduate, because you have to have that kind of bigger picture.
Absolutely.
And in fact, I think a lot of these issues that we see now around the world, whether it's climate change, whether it's inequality, civil strife, you know, divisions within our societies, have to start at the local level and build up.
And this came up in the executive limo as well,
Yes,
didn't it?
exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
and this is going to sound incredibly Alan Partridgey, but well, it's not dissimilar to what we're. But there was a lot of stuff in the press over the weekend. Radio 4 were all over it, and it, you know. And there's obviously a huge amount going on in this country about what is Britishness. You know, we've seen the flags going up. We've seen, you know, information, disinformation, missing. You know, we live in a world of what is true. But it does seem to be that, and I don't know whether it's obviously you're a digital native, and I suppose I'm a digital immigrant. I've seen the changes, and I've been through Web 1, Web 2.0, apps, social, etc., etc. But I think, you know, the very diversionary tactics we see being used by no one actually also knowing what the difference between far left and far right is. It's just anybody that doesn't agree with me with my very strong opinion. Yeah. You are far the other side. And I've completely forgotten where I'm going with this, and I'm going to lose that. I could ask you
something to do with the idea of identity,
working closely.
I mean, it's that local, it's that grassroots community level, and it's if you can establish, and it's that mixture. Oh, thank you, Dave.
Pleasure.
That 6 years in psychotherapy was really useful.
It was.
Thank you. Our memory. But those links between community and business, social, I just think if they work locally, it's almost an education.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so I'm always quite surprised by Whitchurch, by how it's actually, you know, it's a relatively small town, huge diversity of...
You mean Shropshire's biggest little town?
Well, there you go. But, you know, in Whitchurch itself, especially when you come back now and you still look at it as a bit of an outsider, you see that there's such a huge range of people, you know, different economic backgrounds, social backgrounds, more and more diverse ethnically as well. And I think when, you know, with all of these issues, when you see that person as your neighbour, when you're working with them day to day, when you're volunteering with them, when you're doing ththese grassroots level things, it's much harder to then say, oh, well, that group is the problem, you know, because that's more and more what we see in national politics, is saying that group is the problem. And so I think there's a huge amount of value to that, to starting locally and then building up rather than the other way around.
I think, go on, Ben.
Sorry, true, but there is something to be said. Like, we're not all the same. There is a sense of because you mentioned it, like looking at things like an outsider, and you said before about where you work, like it's not very easy to always assimilate other cultures' points of view into the game plan for your chaps.
Yeah, we have to find that kind of, and this is a reason why I actually am really passionate about the built environment. Yeah, how we build our cities, how we invest in communities, not just cities. Actually, I say cities in Uzbekistan. These are cities with like 15,000 people, so we could call Whitchurch a city on this level. But if you create that space, that physical space where you can meet, you can say I'm different. We accept that, but we're neighbours. We work together. You don't have to constantly be assimilating quite to that same level, I don't think, to feel that pressure on your inside things.
Differences needn't particularly divide. Exactly. They can just be acknowledged and like, oh, cool, yeah.
And if you acknowledge the diversity of a town like Whitchurch,
absolutely,
then that's the starting point, rather than probably trying to claim that everybody's in a box, because actually when push comes to shove, nobody is in the same.
No, we don't. Who wants to be part of a grey block mass?
Exactly,
How do you make the media, though, also recognise that? Because... My daughter lives in Leeds. It's a very multicultural place. Yeah. The press is full of these people hate those people and all this kind of thing going on all the time in the press. But if you go to Leeds and go to Roundhay Park, you will see Sikhs playing cricket with Muslims and Jewish people and white English people and Polish people, and they're all having a great time, and nobody ever puts that in the paper and goes, hey, look at this, somebody's having a really good time with another person.
It's not salacious enough, is it? It's not exciting.
I'll be honest with you, I've been looking at the UK, especially for the past 13 months of my biggest stretch abroad just gone, and I was part of me was quite scared to come back. You hear about the divisions going on here and the way the media are telling them. You come back and actually everybody is getting on. There are these people. I was in London a couple of weeks ago during those huge protests. It's happening. I'm not denying that. But actually, our country is a normal country where people can get on. And so it's unfortunate. It's the way media is going back to digital. It's
the Pareto law as well. You've got 20% of people, probably less, making 80% of the noise. Yeah. And the media stoke it because it sells.
Yeah, exactly.
And you could argue whether it's being used or not by certain parts of society and the government for their own ends. I don't know, but I think 80% of people, I think, probably are actually fairly decent.
Yeah.
And you've probably found that.
Absolutely.
So you've obviously gone to a foreign country, a very different part of the world. And have you found acceptance easy? You were accepted?
It's funny, actually. I mean, Central Asia, for those that don't know, Central Asia, so Uzbekistan specifically, borders Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. Right? I've been stood on the side of the Amudar, the other side is Afghanistan. I was there about a month after the Taliban took over. And,
wow. And after the deal.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And so there's a huge amount of attention given to the rise of Islamic fundamentalism, which has also been a concern across the UK as well. And I've been to the area with the most conservative Islam in Uzbekistan. So this is quite heavy stuff. This is women not going out during the day and things. And I sit in a taxi, and for example, for men, it's quite uncouth to wear shorts. Mm-hmm. I sit in a taxi. I'm obviously a foreigner, bare white like this, and they say, oh, so what branch of Islam are you? And I thought, I'm not, and then, whoa, but still, there's a real acceptance there. They just go, okay, well, guess you're not gonna, come to our heaven then.
No, and
it's not trying to force on you in the way that many people would expect from that part of the world.
Which is interesting, because that is held up as being, one of the biggest issues.
Exactly.
With Islam, that absolutely, they are a conquering religion, and everybody has to be converted.
No, and it's not.
And it's the stoking, though. It's the stoking.
It's the media.
It's the stoking of the extreme levels of it.
Yeah.
But that's my Afghanistan has always fascinated me, and I've had relatives and friends that have served out there. And there was a brilliant book written a while ago by an ex-Times journalist called The Great Game. Mm-hmm. And it was just a fascinating history of, and I think it was turned into a series of plays for senior NATO officers who were going to go out and serve in Afghanistan. And it was basically the history of Afghanistan from 1810, 1812 up until 1910, and how it was, it was deemed as being the buffer zone for India, and obviously with Great Britain and India and Russian designs on India, but just a really fascinating history of the country.
Yeah, so Uzbekistan was that Russian side of, between and Afghanistan was that buffer zone. It's very tempting, especially with an IR background, to tell stories about these countries from an outsider's perspective.
Of course.
To tell the story of Afghanistan through... so exactly. So then the British invaded, then the Russians invaded, then the Soviets invaded, then the US. But I saw a book in a bookshop the other day that was Lise Doucet, very famous.
It's been released. Is that
Hotel? Yeah, and it's about.
It looks amazing,
and it's about the history of Kabul.
Yes,
told through the hotel and the people that are staying there. And you start from the inside and then look outwards, and actually. There's some great sayings about the way that the Afghans are the only ones that have never been defeated in Afghanistan, because everyone has to leave eventually. And so it's this whole kind of perspective that we have, and I see it in every area of my work, whether it's climate, development, international relations, diplomacy, regional relations, where actually you really just have to start from what the people are asking for, what's happening on the ground, and then work upward. And it's very tempting to put these very clear narratives on, because that's what we do.
But we sometimes have to. That's very, very human, and sometimes there's no other way of doing it. You just you have to trust that the journalist or the historian has actually got the proper source material. But again, it all comes back to everything direct human relationships and listening to people and trying to understand people from their perspective, showing some empathy.
Which is interesting. So I work for the World Bank, right? And there's a lot of people there who are economists who work on finance. I'm not a financial guy. But more and more now people are talking about, so we've discovered that these narratives that we had about these big, simple things didn't really work. Let's try and have new ones about how, day to day, these human connections. And then how can we put a value on that? How do we encourage investment that happens with that in mind, rather than pure economic returns, say?
So like the UK is always touted as having soft power.
Yes,
it's that slightly softer side, which actually is completely in line with the two have to go together.
Yeah, exactly. And this is a shorter term view. In the long term, you can talk about completely doing away with the idea of value, for example, but in the short term, these economists are saying, right, well, this is what we have to do. We have to try and quantify and value what we actually have. And what we actually care about, rather than what's just trying to go for more short-term growth, short-term foreign policy aims, etc. So, it's a very interesting time. I mean, what's strange is that to see what's happening on the global stage with Trump and the UN yesterday and everything else, and then
that was some speech.
It was, and then the reaction at the local level, which is, Trump said climate change doesn't exist. We know that it does because we feel it every day. And it's hard to put those two together, and I work for a development organisation that's based in Washington, but is trying to act on climate change in Central Asia because the Central Asian governments want it because they feel it.
We know what Trump's view on the UN is in many ways. Well, obviously, the UN is at a difficult period of its time, when you've got the Security Council is basically blocked because Russia is one part of it. What's his view of the World Bank?
So his view of development as a whole is quite profit driven. He's a businessman.
Deals.
Yes.
The master of the deal.
Exactly. And, for example, the Uzbek president seems to get on very well with Trump because they both, the system on for a lot of governments actually is built around investments, and the higher the deals. And so they've been able to play that very well in the short term. Trump should be gone in 3 years. The World Bank has been around since 1946.
But you say the Uzbek government have, I wouldn't say played him, but they've negotiated well with him.
Yeah, I'd say all the Central Asian states have, actually. They're really coming into their own at the moment. So, Soviet Union fell in 1991.
Yeah.
For a long time, all the analysts in the West were going, that's just Russia. They're basically just Russia.
Yeah.
Just Russian vassal states. They just do whatever the Kremlin says. And it's only really in the past 2 or 3 years that everyone's woken up and gone, well, actually, they're playing everyone off each other. They know what they want from each side.
It's like Tito in Yugoslavia.
More so, in the sense that they're, there have been weeks where you watch the foreign policy channels and they're going from China straight to Brussels, then to Washington, then to Tehran.
Yeah.
Nobody is the enemy when you're just trying to do better for your country.
Absolutely.
And I think it's a really interesting approach.
Is that common across the central states, the Russian ex-Soviet states?
Central Asia, I would say that Kazakhstan, So most of them, yes. Turkmenistan is an interesting case. It's much more authoritarian than the other ones, but has big sort of claims to neutrality and those kind of things in world politics. So in different ways, but yes, they're all very interesting, and they're all actually have been ignored for far too long by our part of the world.
So what's Putin's view on these states?
So any
ambitions?
Well, he would if he didn't have all his soldiers in Ukraine instead, I would say.
Absolutely.
I mean, ambitions, I don't know. I think for a long time it was fine because they were trading partners. They were close enough that they felt comfortable with them, in the sense that they didn't feel comfortable with what Ukraine was doing, rightly or wrongly. Well, wrongly, I would say, definitely. But they sort of realise now that concentrating on one means that this part of the world all of a sudden has complete, freedom to do whatever it wants, and that's come along with, at the same time, huge rapid development for these countries themselves, opening up politically. So it's been, I'd say, the past definitely 5 years have been absolutely fascinating.
So do you think you've been there at the right time?
Yeah, I would say so. Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan have actually all of them have some of the youngest population in the world, most digitally literate. Certainly most people under 25 now speak better English than I've encountered in England sometimes. And the government is just supporting everybody there. And it's very impressive, I have to say.
A friend of mine, he's a journalist, and he moved to Qatar when Al Jazeera English set up, I think during the second of the Iraq wars and then the second Afghanistan war, because they were seen as offering a different skew on the news at the time. I think and a lot of the Western population were watching it because it was seen as being a slightly different angle. He went out to work for them, and Qatar have positioned themselves in a certain way, Dubai are positioning themselves in a certain way to the rest of the world. Is that the case in the areas that you're working?
Yeah, and interestingly, like the Middle Eastern model, the Gulf model, is one of the ones that these other countries are looking to follow. So Uzbekistan is... Yes, exactly. Uzbekistan is a middle income. Some of them are slightly poorer. Kazakhstan slightly richer by GDP. But, they're looking around the world. And what I sort of personally would really like to do, and I think generally what most of the development organisations now say, is, right, take your own path, take what works from other parts of the world, take what doesn't for you, and then try, and then we will try from our side to push what we want you to take as well. So, for example, the EU gives a lot of development aid. They're very big on European values, human rights, rule of law, etc. And some of those absolutely necessary in these states are the ones the countries are saying, well, China is saying we want to do this instead.
China have had a huge hand in Africa, haven't they?
China have also had a huge hand in Central Asia.
Here as well.
So Iran is quite a big trading partner. The Gulf states are quite a big trading partner. It's very varied, and they don't generally see a problem with that. They say, right, these countries want to support us. I certainly, like I say, I personally would like to see that, where there's no defined path. In many ways they shouldn't and can't be like the Gulf states. They're not oil rich, for a start. But the biggest one for me is to have these, people having a say in what happens in the government, and for that to be in tune with what these countries have to offer. Like I say, culturally incredibly rich, huge amount of social values, social cohesion that a lot of other countries could learn from, quite frankly. And so
what do they have to offer? Sorry to interrupt. Is it a cultural thing that they really have to offer? Like Mark was saying before about a soft.
Yeah, I think in many ways. Or should countries have to offer it, or should they just try and develop what they have themselves?
True.
But so Tashkent is the safest place I've ever lived. You can leave your door unlocked, you can leave your car unlocked, you can leave your phone on the metro station platform, come back 3 hours later, it'll still be there, or it will have been handed to a policeman.
Wow.
This is a country that borders Afghanistan, that's in a region that borders China, Russia and Iran. People don't think this is a part of the world you would want to live in. In many ways, it really is. And so things like that, the values that people have put on family. Of course, there's a spectrum, right? This is a very traditional Islamic society in many ways, and there's many things I see there that happen in families, say relations towards certain parts of the family, and I don't like that. But it does create there is a huge amount of cohesion there. There's a huge amount of support, and I think every part of the world can learn from itself, can learn from the others, and try and develop an approach that will work for them. It's a naive view, but it's one that I think we have to be aiming for, because why else are we working to try and change what we do on the local level?
So if we, for example, the UK, we talk about finance, we're a finance hub. So CANAL might say, it's entertainment, it's sport, it's media. If they have their this is what we're going for. Does that exist, or is it?
So I think there's still a huge amount of focus on themselves.
Yeah,
because there is still a 9% poverty rate,
which is why you're there.
Exactly, and so that's what we try and start with, I think. But more and more, yes. I mean, so they're trying to massively open up to tourism. So they have a huge amount of history. People born in Uzbekistan, Al-Karabi. The sort of the deformation of that name turned to algebra. He was the one that invented algebra. They have people that discovered planets way before we had in what we consider to be our Renaissance period. Huge amount of culture like that, for example.
There's something about because you mentioned before that people just assume that this neck of the woods was just nothing
like
more
a black hole.
And also Russian. Did you say like Russian vassals?
Absolutely, yeah.
They're their own. Wouldn't it be? They're like becoming their own brand.
Yeah, absolutely,
like that.
And they definitely they have a huge history that started way before Russia invaded. Russia invaded during its imperial time, said the Tsars. They have a huge history that goes way before that. But it was forgotten about. People didn't want to talk about it. It wasn't part of Russia's agenda to spread that. It's Islamic countries.
Sorry, I got
why would it? It just wanted to take it exactly
and say that this was empty space.
Yes, this was our stuff, our territory. We claimed it.
British Empire did the same thing.
We're still living the echoes of the past. Massively.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it takes a while. The Cold War only finished relatively recently.
Yeah.
It wasn't Kissinger that said it, but it was someone that was associated with it. What was the effect of the French Revolution is too soon to tell. And we're still living in the massive echoes of the past.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, speaking from the point of view of someone who was educated in the
during the French
60s
Revolution
and 70s, no, I mean
70s, 60s.
This part of the world is not even a thing that was mentioned. It's just a place full of Johnny Turk. Foreigners live there.
Johnny Foreigner.
Yeah, Johnny Foreigner.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're right there.
Yeah. This is the cult. I mean, so I lived in a country where it didn't rain for 5 or 6 months. No, sorry.
You want to try drinking more beer or get rid of the cough?
Yeah. No, that's good. So I had a slight cold when I got back from London because of just the changes in temperature.
Whereabouts in London were you?
I was in the city.
Okay.
So Adams...
With work?
No, Adams Grammar is a haberdasher's school.
Okay.
So they're one of the old livery companies. So I still stay part of that. It's a charity, essentially. They give millions of pounds to charity every year. So I still support that as well.
Okay.
Which is really interesting. I've got friends dotted all around the country now as well, which is very fortunate for. Yeah. But always try and come back here.
So where do you see yourself? It's a stupid question maybe, but
no.
What's your end? Because as we've mentioned on the phone, I have a couple of friends, both worked for the UN as medical doctors, and one just decided to go on a sabbatical and ended up working for the BBC as a videographer and then starting a great safari because he knows the locals brilliantly and they know exactly what they're trying to do. Where do you see yourself? Do you consider you...
So I'm very grateful for the experience that I've had that took me from thinking that to make a change on the global scale, something like climate change, health, division, inequality, whatever, you have to do, something at the UN or at the EU or in the Foreign Office. You don't. And more I'm realising that I think my sort of approach is also to work from the ground up. So I've become very interested in urban development, very interested in communities and cities and built environment, how that changes what we do as people, as societies. So, I work for the World Bank. That sounds very glamorous. Is to say I work in a small city in Uzbekistan doesn't. But I would like to find a balance between the two of those. Where that takes me, I love that part of the world, but equally there's a lot of opportunities everywhere else. Russian helps as well, working there, so I probably have to learn another language. But I'm very open to sort of lots of different paths. I think the biggest thing is keeping that human connection, keeping that groundedness in the local level. Whether that would be back in Shropshire, I don't know. That's another question. But I'll always have roots here. So,
but I think that the point about that grassroots level, and you talk about the big idea and the big picture thinking, which is something I've always been really interested in, and I've sometimes negated the details. And okay, it's a very different thing I've done and you do. However, to get that big picture view and to get that thought, that big idea, you absolutely need to immerse yourself in what's really going on and the real facts. Because otherwise you're just making assumptions and you're basing ideas on prejudice, on biased thinking in any shape or form.
And I have to say, like, I think one of the biggest things for me, especially as a younger person, to go away from this part of the world, I grew up here for 18 years, go away to university, go and live in another continent, come back, and that really sort of does open your eyes to what places like Whitchurch have to offer, what doing stuff at the local level has to offer in this much bigger picture thinking. And I think a huge part of what we were going back to what we said about the media, going back to what community initiatives do, is that they try to open people's eyes to that in other ways as well.
And if you imagine as well, you go away and you're working with a less developed part of the world, a less advanced potentially part of the world. But you go away and you look at how that works at grassroots level and what you're trying to do and how people are interacting. You then come back and you go, well, actually, I'm educating the West. I'm educating Western Europe.
Yeah, absolutely.
These things are done much more appropriately and more effectively here, and you think they are. Yeah. You think these countries are way less developed.
Yeah, I mean, so there was an approach in development in, let's say, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, where all they did was say to these, African countries, Asian countries, you have to follow the path that we had. You need a revolution, you need a 5-day working week, 8 hours a day, you need this, that. And more the approach now is to say, okay, like I was saying before, let's take what works from what you have, let's take what works from other parts of the world. And it's very easy for us, especially this is a very academic approach, right? And it's what a lot of people in our world-leading universities say. But actually, it's also what we should be saying to our government as well. Listen to what we have on our streets, what works on our streets, and be a bit more open-minded to that as well. And I think that's something that everyone has to learn from.
There's like a wisdom. There's like a wisdom to be found in. Yeah. Somewhere where in the way you actually live your life. Yeah. So when you go out onto the street, what do you actually do? What actually matters? What isn't right? What? So I work with youth climate activists in Uzbekistan, and more, what I say to them personally is, I say, right, think about what isn't right in your life. Do you like being stuck in traffic for an hour a day every day when you go to school or not? And they say no. And I say, well, what's the issue there? They say it's traffic. What's traffic causing? Emissions. What's emissions causing? Global warming. So right, to take that in reverse. What are you scared about? Climate change. What don't you like in your life? Being stuck in traffic. What can you ask for? Better ways to get to school.
Hoverboards.
Well, walking. I think walking would be a nice start.
Enough people live near enough to their school to walk who don't.
Exactly. Yeah, and of course other options. If it's not, then it's these are kids that generally live in cities. But buses. Let's take what people actually are asking for and let's try and do that. And then also what we have to value is also what works in our cities. Why is Shropshire actually a really nice place to live? Let's just stop for a moment and think, okay, you don't have to go away for 13 months like I did to then come back and think, well, actually, this is a good place to live.
Look, the stuff growing by the side of the road.
So
I like it. Wow, it's great to go abroad, like stretch my legs and like see what life's like. But I come back and it's like, wow, there's nothing like all the greenery here.
So 2 days ago, so I've got a friend who is from Karakal, Pakistan, in Uzbekistan, which is one of the poorest, least developed parts of Uzbekistan. They have a huge ecological crisis there, disappearance of the Aral Sea, huge fishing industry, and now there's literally no water. Sand and dust storms, childhood cancer rates are high. So she worked in Tashkent, I worked with her there. She won a Chevening scholarship. So the UK Foreign Office pay for them to come and study in the UK. They have to go back then and have a positive influence on their country. She's studying in Manchester. She came about 2 weeks ago, and on Wednesday I invited her to Whitchurch. I said, get the train and I'll show you what England is to me, what the UK is to me. And so she arrived in Whitchurch Station, platform 2, and she said, wow, it's so green. And so she's probably the first Uzbek in Whitchurch, definitely the first Karakal Pak in Whitchurch. And the whole 3 or 4 hours, she was walking on air. She walked out to Station Road. There's a post box by the station.
Yeah.
The blackberries behind it. She said, "You can eat these."
Why does the Blackberry Fair get into everything?
And then walking down Station Road, she's taking photos of the houses on Station Road, going, "This is so beautiful. This is like Switzerland." And then we were walking down Thompson Drive, and she said, "This is like a Van Gogh painting. I've lived here 18 years, and I've never compared our part of the world to either Switzerland or a Van Gogh painting." But she got the train a few hours later. This is, that's really opened my eyes now. The past couple of days, I'm thinking, yeah, actually, there's a lot.
Pretty cool, isn't it?
When she grows up in a place like that, and I go there, and I go to their small towns, and I'm taking photos.
And you must think it's amazing.
I know, I think it's amazing, and everyone's going, "Oh, what are you? It's just normal life," And then she's taking photos of the curry house by the junction and Station Road. And I'm like, "Oh, come on, that's just normal." But for them, that's interesting.
Spice heaven.
Exactly.
It's all of those.
Yeah.
It's difference and just curious minds.
Yeah.
And we get very used, and we become almost apathetic about things that we really should be really grateful for.
Yeah, and I think be a bit more curious, be a bit more open to what's actually on your street outside, and it's a great start to actually then solving those global problems that.
Already a similarity. We're not really all that much different. We do the same thing. It doesn't matter.
Exactly.
You come from somewhere else. You take it for granted. You go somewhere new, and you're like, wow.
Yeah, absolutely. And I often see their close families and their really sort of amazing fruit and veg and the community and the culture, and I go, "God, I could live here." And then she comes here and she goes, "Oh, it's so quiet, it's so comfortable, everything's so ordered." The amount of times I've stood at the Station Road traffic lights and go, "Oh, these aren't working," everyone's going around.
Yeah.
And then she comes here and she's looking and she goes, "Everything here is so calm and so ordered. You people are just so, and again,
they haven't been outside last orders at 2 a.m.
I don't know the ones,
Exactly.
the ones I know.
No, that's right.
Right,
to an
Charlie.
outsider, yeah."
That was absolutely brilliant. We said we'd get you home now, and we will. That is brilliant. Thank you so much
I'm glad. It's a pleasure
for
to be
coming
here.
in and delaying your flight.
Thank you for the beer.
We're gonna pretend that actually did happen.
Thoroughly enjoyed that, Charlie. Thank you for
glad.
that.
No, it's fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you. No, it's
We've got a future real famous person in here, I reckon, don't you?
Dave,
No, right.
yeah.
he's middle-aged.
Yeah,
He's not part of this.
It's always
way
time.
past it,
No,
mate.
I think it's not the last we're going to hear.
I'd love you to come back.
Charlie.
I'd love you to come back again.
Well,
And if you bring a friend from Uzbekistan,
it was very cool.
that would be brilliant.
It was so cool when she
That
came.
would be
she came
amazing.
Yeah. Their idea of hiking is a bit different. She said, because I put a photo of the fields and it looks like Windows XP, the background.
Yeah.
And everyone loves that. And she replies and said, "I'd love to come here for hiking." She turns up from Whitchurch Station with these shoes from the Wizard of Oz, And so we walked down the high street.
Hiking with them. Yeah.
To be fair, I was taking up the Reekin.
Not half.
Well, there was. It's Jim Dale in here. Not only a few years ago, and I attempted the Reekin in a pair of Italian suede driving loafers.
Did you?
And it was
More
more difficult than I expected.
But you were stylish, though.
Yeah, exactly.
But God, when I got to the top, did I cut a dash?
Did I?
Wow.
Did I slay?
7 counties and some Italian loafers. Looked
Wow.
perfect. The shoot was fantastic.
Pretty swish.
Right.
From Wood-
Fabulous.
Kill it,
I'm
Laurie.
going to kill it.
On that note,
We're done.
On that note, the plane's about to fly. The lock-in is a conversation on a canal boat, often accompanied by beer. Every couple of weeks, we'll talk to someone from Whitchurch who has contributed to our community, who has a story, who makes the town special. They could come from any age, any background, any walk of life, but they embody the spirit of this fantastic, sometimes overly modest little market town. So, if you have a story, something to say, or know someone that does, we'd love you or them to get on board and tell us what floats your boat, gets your engine running, makes you tick. You get the picture.